Hello, listening people.
Hello.
Hello, comrade. How are you doing?
Good, comrade. How are you?
Oh, I'm feeling very not greedy. Greed is bad. Here's a song about greed. In fact, Bartek. How?
Ryan, you're intimidating me. I should let you know that I've been doing my exercises, so don't try to mess with me.
I've got to pass you on the black spot of death for your comments. We are back. We have come back from our little break. Bartek and I have had a lot of stuff happening, but we haven't forgotten to do the podcast. We aren't forgetting our show, Pictures Powwow, the only Australian Polish podcast in the top 10 Polish podcasts. That's a fact. I'm not lying. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not seeing any others in there.
Yeah, the top 10.
The top 10 Polish podcasts. Whose list is this? Well,
I honestly don't remember.
Look it up.
It's the list.
It's Poland's list. The entire nation. Because Spin Polish is a little bit of a play on words where we're always spitting, and we both happen to be Polish, which is true. We both have Polish names and family and things of that nature. Any interesting Polish facts from you, Bartek? Any interesting things that you've picked up or learned recently? In fact, you've been spending some time with your Polish dad, so you actually have some answers for this question this
week. We
week.
both were spending times with our respective dads with Polish last names.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God, early on in his visit, they taught me the word for turtle in Polish, and I remember it was really close to the word for yellow. The yellow is żółty, so maybe turtle was something like żółt or something like that.
Żółt.
Yeah, so if you ever go up to a Polish person and say, what's yellow turtle, you'll probably hear them say the same thing twice.
Okay, well, I guess I'll share the fact that you gave me. We got some updates on the Polish lektor system of dubbing from your father. So for those who are not in the know, and I love informing you people because it's very, very funny.
You people.
Lektors are a form of dubbing in Poland. So when they get a foreign film, an English language film, they will have one monotoned person, usually a man, usually one specific man, just say all of the lines, say all of it over the top of the movie. Now, the audio for the movie still exists. It's just lowered.
It's like when you see a foreign politician making a big speech and it's on your local news and you'll have like someone speak over him translating.
That's exactly the way to describe it.
Yeah, I remember last Saturday I brought up that comparison. Like, why have we never made that before?
I don't think about politics. We're not a political podcast. We're a film podcast. But you have some updates on lektors because we get great amusement from telling people and us knowing what lektors are because it is a very strange way of doing things because for a fact, Poland does not like normal dubbing, the conventional dubbing. So when something like Stranger Things had a full Polish dub, Poland said, no, thank you, give us a lektor. In fact, give us this lektor in specific. And it's like, why? And you had a bit of a chat with your dad about this.
It was a nice Valentine's dinner,
Yeah, oh, romantic. So can you imagine watching a romantic movie, like a Love Actually or something, and then the lektor comes in? I mean, you wouldn't have to imagine. You would probably know.
It's like, I love kocham cię.
So what have you learned?
What have I learned? Well, obviously it's my dad's anecdote about it, but since he is of the Poland, he will represent all of Poland. He said that basically whenever they do dubbing, they seem to only pull from a pool of like 20 actors in Poland that have some sort of, I guess voice acting credential.
Just like how there's a certain pool of very well-known anime voiceover artists when it comes to like Western stuff where they're doing it in English, like their names.
Yeah, but since, I don't know that Poland has that big of a film animation industry, most of their actors would be, like live action people. Mm-hmm. And so when you see a couple of, dubbed things, you kind of just hear the same voices over and over again. And it feels too samey, which that's a very ironic thing.
Considering like they have three lectors who is the voice entirely for the whole 2-hour movie.
Yeah, and the whole point is that they speak in this clear, not too emotive tone.
Very authoritarian tone. I love the logic there. See, what we don't like about the dubbers is there's only a handful of them. Why? Why aren't there more? How long has the industry been just surviving on these 12 dubbers? Like, I don't, whatever. But that is inconsequential, although it is very important because we're talking about foreign ways of doing things. That relates to a movie that has come up for today's discussion where you suggested this. So could you please tell everyone listening, what film you pitched up for Pictures Powwow?
Yes, so as I said last episode many, many weeks ago, similar to your last pick, I also went with a foreign animated film. I went with the 1988 Soviet film Treasure Island. Update on that because you had questions last time. The film is in Russian, but it was made in what is now basically Ukraine.
I noted that down. Yeah. I looked up some of the directors and writers, and they were from Ukraine, and but a lot of the actors are from all over the place.
Yeah, there's like an Armenian, Russian,
what was Russia now is not necessarily, and vice versa. It's a crazy period of time, but
they were in a big united family at that time.
To sum it up for everyone listening out there, rather than those in the conversation, which is you and me, Bartek. If you haven't seen this, it's quite simple. It's Treasure Island, the story of Treasure Island, which is a well-told story. And if you have not even encountered Treasure Island as a story, I don't know what to tell you other than it's a classic, but this does that, but through animation, through a musical lens, and of course with Soviet ideology and messaging. And it is actually a comedic film as well. Yeah. So watch it. It's available on YouTube with subtitles, so you can easily watch it for yourselves. It is a very surreal experience, very different, very funny, very unique. So I am wanting to know a bit more from you. Why this? Why this? Give us a rundown of even how you found this.
So I think I introduced it last time as me discovering it because of memes. I'd been seeing recurring animations on YouTube or on the internet of. Do you know what the meme is now? No.
I've looked up basically nothing of this film.
Fair enough.
I wanted you to surprise me.
So basically, do you remember when in the scene where you meet Long John Silver at the pub? You know when they enter the pub and then they go to sit down? The shot of them walking between them entering and sitting down, where the three of them are walking side profile and they all have like different gaits.
Yeah.
That is the meme. So I'd been seeing a bunch of animations of replacing the three characters in this film with, whatever other characters with similar body proportions and walking in their own different styles. And I kept seeing this obviously throughout like the latter half of last year. I'm like, what is this from? This feels like a very old thing, but is it something that people have known and has just come back? Like, what is going on here? And then one day I actually sat down to look it up. I think I went to like Know Your Meme or something. And it said that, this is from a 1988 Soviet film. I'm like, so it is from something that is old, but it's also from like an unexpected region that I wouldn't think would influence like, international meme culture. So that basic discovery was kind of what inspired my curiosity to actually check out the film.
Right. I was trying to figure out what the meme was because you mentioned that there's a meme thing in this, and I thought maybe it was some of those types of movements in the animation because it has a very specific style to it. Both fluid and stiff. It's rather wacky. We have talked about Japanese animated films on here, and when we talk about TV shows like Japanese animes, there's a stiffness in comparison to Western animation where there's different frame rates and
I was thinking
stuff of that nature. And so this is a country that's in between of what Japan does and what Hollywood does,
Yeah,
where it's both fluid and janky.
I was thinking throughout this film of when we did Tokyo Godfathers, and you asked me, like, oh, what do you think of the animation? And I was talking about how it's very fluid and like similar to lifelike movements. And every character has that. This is like very fluid, but for like cartoony movements.
Very reminiscent of something like Popeye, for instance, and especially their arms. But I was trying to guess the meme. I thought perhaps it was that the Doctor character in general, because
he is like the big Chad character seems to be.
Because he has a very different design to everyone else, and it's almost as if they've animated him differently to every other character. He's far more fluid and bouncy and strange, and he did stick out. Oh, I was thinking, and this is going to give away. I'm just going to say this was my favorite character and my favorite sequence, which was the blind Pew was their name, I do believe, and their introduction, just their whole sequence. I thought that was absolutely stellar and fantastic, and I loved that character. I wish they were in the movie more. They were just there for just that sequence particularly, and so I really didn't know what I was getting into. I
really didn't know beyond like the few things I mentioned.
I didn't even know what the animation was going to look like. I didn't look up the video on YouTube, so I didn't know what length it was going to be until I sat down to watch it and check if it had subtitles. So, how familiar are you with the Treasure Island story?
Not 100% sure if I've seen an adaptation of it, but like you said, it is pretty simple. It's, treasure map. Group of guys go to find the treasure, some pirates.
Long John Silver.
Like, there were names throughout. It's like, oh, yeah, that name's from the Treasure Planet, Island.
I mean, Treasure Planet is Treasure Island.
Yeah. I seen Treasure Planet forever ago.
And if you think about Treasure Planet, it's the same story. Where you have the young, fresh-faced guy who's a bit of a dweeb, but a naive character who gets swept along this fantastical journey on this pirate ship, and he accidentally stumbles across a conspiracy with the cook of the ship who wants to take it over and get the treasure for themselves, and he's got his cohorts, and they have to fight against it before... That's Treasure Island.
Yeah.
You haven't seen The Muppets Treasure Island? That's worth watching.
I really haven't seen many Muppets films.
Well, okay. Now think about this.
I've seen one.
It's the Muppets, right?
Yeah.
But Long John Silver's played by Tim Curry.
Mm-hmm.
That's the pitch.
That's a good pitch.
And they sing, of course. And Tim Curry plays. Here's the best description of it. In the Christmas Carol Muppet film, Michael Caine played it very much like it was a genuine Charles Dickens. This is a real movie. That's what makes his performance so great. What makes Tim Curry's performance so great is he plays it like he is a Muppet. and that makes if there's anyone who can do it, it's Tim.
There you go.
He is so fun. But I am deeply familiar with it because I grew up with a lot of media that was redoing it. I feel like from the 80s to the early 2000s, it was Treasure Island everywhere. With this obviously exists in the late 80s. There's Treasure Planet. There's the Muppets Treasure Island. There was a Treasure Island adaptation with Christian Bale at some point as well, like very young Christian Bale when he was still a child actor, because people forget that he was a child actor. But I have seen... I want to say like almost what feels like half a dozen or so versions of this. And I have never read the original source material. I've never engaged with the original, but I like my pirate stuff, as I imagine you do as well. We grew up in the age of Pirates of the Caribbean, so pirate mania was in
it's a fun archetype.
It was in our zeitgeist growing up, and a lot of piratey stuff comes back to this story. So even you being not 100%, you go, oh, I know this and this and this when you're watching it. Now, I will admit it did impede some of my enjoyment of this animated film because, it's the same story, but it's got its merits of it's being told in such a fun way. But I did grow tired of it because I just know all of the beats of this, because even the most wacky versions of this when it comes to the Soviet version or the Disney Treasure Planet, it's like, yeah, you got to hit those moments. It's like when you see a different Shakespeare adaptation,
Yeah.
and you go, yeah. It's cool that you're doing it in modern day with John Leguizamo and Leonardo DiCaprio, but it's still Romeo and Juliet.
Mm.
So I had that stop me from fully appreciating this. How was your overall watching?
Not being super familiar with the exact beats of it, it did feel a little bit more fresh for me. I especially appreciated the first half. So, like, we probably noticed when watching it, there's part 1, part 2. Part 1 is where we, like, introduce to all the characters and they have their little bio that pops up. A lot of, like, character interaction-y things going on. And part 2 is mostly at the island, with the hijinks going on there. So that was a lot of fun, but yeah, walking into it, not really knowing what to expect out of it. Like, I'd seen, the animation of the walking, so I knew that there was fluidity, but I was really impressed by a lot of the techniques they were doing that were, like, felt like live action stuff. Like, there were shifts in camera angles within the same shots. It's like, oh man, this is a very 2D animated thing, but it's giving me a sense of, like, the 3D space of everything. Like, I remember there was one shot. What was the guy that originally had the map? Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one shot where he was looking out the window and you get, like, a shot of just basically the frame of the window. Then it zooms back to being behind the two guys there and then, like, goes down to a low angle. It's like, damn.
The credits, the end credits, if you watch them to the very, very end, also gave you some insight into that, where we got to see some of the actors who played these characters, and they were the visual points of reference. So you got to see the side-by-sides. And animation used to do that all the time. Disney animation used to do that, hence there's many behind-the-scenes footage of some of these actors, of, say, the kid who played Robin Hood, or not Robin Hood, of the kid who played Peter Pan, and girl played Cinderella, and all of these people, if you go back, they would film them and sketch them and get stuff from them. So you get that here, and I totally agree with you. I was also quite surprised by the impressive animation. It does falter from time to time. There's cheap stuff in there. There's just awkward, weird mistakes, but for what this is, which is what I do believe is a TV special.
Yeah, 2-part.
For the Soviet Union, made in the late 80s. It's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
The voice acting, although I don't speak the language, I could just feel the fun, but also the intensity. My favorite voice actor, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of yours, is Long John Silver. John Silver himself. That guy was intimidating. He was not playing it like he's in a funny little movie like some of the others. He had a genuinely deep, rich, menacing voice where, and again, this is high praise. I don't understand what he's saying without the subtitles, yet I wanted to listen to every single thing he was saying. He was that commanding of a presence. And when they showed the live action of him at the end, I was like, boy, I could have just watched that. I could have just watched that too. This guy is exactly what I imagined the voice, like the face behind the voice, to be. And wow, what a presence. I looked that guy up, and he only passed away a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And there's still many of them who are still around and active too, but
putting aside the fact that I speak a similar language to the one spoken in this film, like, I could tell from the deliveries as well, like, oh yeah, this is actual acting going on here. They're putting actual performance in there. The guy that plays the doctor character, you could tell that guy was, like, smiling and giggling while he was doing the performance.
having the time of his life.
Yeah.
He's the doctor's evidently a fan favorite. He's become a meme, but it's also not just the animation and the design, but that voice behind it is very infectious. You want to follow that guy.
Yeah.
You want him to be in more scenes because he's the character that's having the most overt amount of fun. And you have fun whilst he is also. One of the things that I was surprised by was live action exists in this.
That was a very
really
big surprise.
shocked about that.
Especially because at the very beginning it makes it seem like, oh, this is a world where there are live action people and animated people because an animated character kills one of the live action people. So I was kind of every time they popped up again, I kept thinking like, oh, so is this like a side story that's happening somewhere? But then evidently we get some songs where it's clearly like, oh no, this is just, I guess, like a side skit, like a Greek chorus kind of thing going on, especially when they're doing the gym song.
There's a meta quality. There's an amazing gag. My favorite gag from them, because I had a 50-50 on whether I liked the live action being in this or not, because I think it was there to pad it out. Honestly,
Yeah.
that's the real reason it's there, because this is almost 2 hours, which is the biggest crime the film commits, is being too long. We talked about A Town Called Panic, and I was like a perfect 70-minute, whatever long movie. I wish this was that long, honestly. But the live action bit that I really adored was when they cut to, here's this band, and we're just going to play their new hit single. And the song is wacky, but one of the things I really loved is none of them are playing the instruments that you're hearing in the song.
Oh, okay.
Like there's this bit where it's like wailing on a guitar, but we're hearing flutes. There's one guy playing drums, and we're hearing bongos. Like it's just one of those things where it's like there was a dissonance because they look like they're Russian punks. One had a mohawk and everything. They're playing like guitar, bass, usual, but the music coming out is not right, or it just doesn't match up visually to what we're being shown, and that really got me. I had a good chuckle at that. I was more amused by that than whatever the song's lyrics were putting down. But and I love the song about greed. Just here's a song about greed. Like, here's a little moral lesson now.
A lot of their songs felt like moral lessons. Yeah.
A lot of their songs felt like, hello, the government said we must put in moral message now to instill onto you, the citizen. That's how they felt.
I was really impressed though, because despite it being black and white and they're using a lot of close-up angles, it really shows you that, or maybe not despite, but their makeup and costume is like really theater quality.
I could have watched a whole live-action little version of this with them.
We have a lot of close-ups of their faces, and they're just so cartoony despite being real people.
So you enjoyed this overall?
I did, yeah. Again, like first half more so than second half, and I did have a pretty big day yesterday, so I had to kind of watch this in 2 chunks because you got to sleep at some point. But
it was designed to be watched in 2 chunks.
Yeah, that's a good point. I probably should have taken a break right when the first part ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was, again, the whole surprise aspect really kind of elevated for me. Like, I didn't expect the live action parts. I didn't know how impressed I would be by like that, again, idea of the 3D space in this 2D animated product. And the big variety of characters, because I did walk in sort of knowing what kind of body types we would see, because I did see the brief bit of like the bar scene. But yeah, there's just a lot of really impressive stuff that like, oh man, it feels like animated films in the last, 30 something years could have learned from this if more people had seen it.
We're looking at you, DreamWorks, with your DreamWorks face. They have a certain type of face they like to use all the time.
Everyone draw every character in this doing the DreamWorks face.
And the Disney animated faces too. It's like Elsa looks like this girl and this girl and this girl. It's like, why do the girls all look the same? Because, women are women. They all have the same face. Why?
And then animate them doing the walk.
Did you have some favorite gags or throwaway jokes or animated sequences that got a laugh out of you?
Oh, there was something really early on back at like the place where Jim was living and working that really got me. I really liked when the Bill character, like he had a running thing about like his sneezing.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Like blowing things away. There was one time where he like did a really big sneeze and it was like a 10-second like hurricane.
That was a truly amazing one.
That was a good escalation, yeah.
My one of my favorite sequences was when that really, 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 really big pirate was just standing there and he's just impervious to all the damage being inflicted upon him. They're throwing stuff at him and ripping trees out of the ground and throwing him at him, and he's just not moving at all. And he's just he's being still for pretty much all of it, but he's just animated in a way where the expression almost feels like it's changing so much in levels of amusement to annoyance, but it's not really changing. He's read so much from just that guy, and when he did lumber, the frame would shake. I got a great amusement, and how he got defeated as well. And like they just treat it with genuine like sorrow and solemn, where he got drowned. Like he grabbed a rocket, and got launched in the water, and he never came out. And the vultures are there, and they all take their hats off. The pirates like, oh, I guess he died. I really thought that was an amazing moment, both of tension, but just showing you that this is a cartoon. This is one of those where it's like we're taking an old story. Like what Disney used to do, we'll take all of these old folk tales, all of these old stories, and we'll animate them. Tell this through animation. Do stuff that only animation can do. And that was one of those where it's like only animation could have given us that. Any others for you? Any other gags?
Gags. Just replaying the movie in my head for a sec.
Scene by scene, frame by frame.
Just a lot of the things the Doctor character was doing, really. There was when they were fighting near the end, when the Jim character was like using just a shitload of guns, just like playing them like a piano. Basically, that was a really good one.
Oh, that was a good one. I like the pirates who were firing off the cannon, and they had like the chain of different cannonballs like it's a machine gun. They had a whole bunch of gags with that where the one pirate's nose kept shaking every time it fired, and he had to hold his nose and it didn't work, and then he just put his finger on the cannon to like push it down, and then it worked. The vibration didn't hit him anymore, and then that pirate firing the cannon got so pissed off that he just grabbed it like it was an Uzi and just started firing everywhere. That was particularly enjoyable. Another moment that I just really enjoyed is the classic dumb thing, but you have characters inside this house. It's the last stand type deal. We'll make our stand here, and we'll draw a line in the sand. And you have the captain, he's out the window. You have the other guy, he's jumped out the front door. And then you have the other guy who's looking at a painting of what looks like a window to the outside, and he just keeps hitting it and hitting it and hitting it.
Felt like 5 minutes of just trying to hit this thing.
Never learning. That's one of those where huge smile was brought to my face.
There was a really cartoony thing earlier in the film when Bill and the black dog were having their little confrontation at the house, and Bill moved the door.
Oh, that was awesome. Anytime a character gets thrown through a wall and the wall is in the outline of their body is also just a classic, but it works because it works. Oh, a moment that isn't funny, but I thought was a perfect use of animation. It was very stunning in its presentation, was when what's our main guy again called? Jim came back from stealing the ship. He came back from stealing the ship. He walked back into their cabin and it's all dark. And then he discovers that Silver's in there. And just then the parrot coming in, and then all of the different pirates slowly emerging from the shadows, and just how that was lit, how that was colored, and the stark shadows and contrasts, and that real, like you said, sense of the third dimension, where you really get that overall look of the characters just crawling and emerging out of the darkness and surrounding this little character. I thought that was just wow. That was a genuinely tense scene with these silly animated looking characters, because they have very over the top designs, but they made them genuinely scary. That was like the one time in the movie where the pirates were genuinely frightening. And I thought, and of course you're pairing it with Silver talking, and that voice actor is commanding the scene with the visuals, a perfect marriage of voice and visual there.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff with camera angles. Like we have a few shots of like people walking from a low angle and we're actually seeing the soles of their feet, like, go onto the camera lens.
That's why I like the blind pew scene. That was one of the first where we really got that. And it
Mm.
would go underneath his foot, but then the camera would keep spinning up and around, and it was very
Yeah,
good.
we also had that when we met Long John Silver and he was like moving for the first time with like the crutch in his one leg. We had it with one of the horses that were being ridden. Going back to that black pew scene, we had that one close up shot of it was just their hands, like when he's handing him the black spot, and just you could tell from looking at the film that like, oh, okay, these characters aren't designed to be like super beautiful or anything like that. They've got these like wrinkles and like skin tones going on. There, you could just see all the details in their hands. Like one of them was really old, decrepit. The other one was a bit more fat, but like also not like rounded. Yeah,
a little bit
wrinkly.
pudgy.
You can get the sense like, oh yeah, there's a bit of hair on there, and yeah, the fluidity of all the hand movements. Like, I obviously we're not really that much of drawing or animation artists, but I do get the sense that a lot of them might have body proportions that they struggle to animate, and just seeing like the masterful hand animation there is just like, wow.
It was a lot of joy put into this, because I'll be honest with you, walking in, I thought, okay, we're going to watch a funny little Soviet-made animated film where there's going to be the thing that I think most people want from it, which is, oh, we're seeing a piece of art that's propaganda, really. That's what I was looking forward to, was we're going to see the Treasure Island, but told from the Soviet perspective, where it's shoving in all of these Soviet messages, which it does do that. There are times where they really talk about sharing the wealth around, and that capitalism is bad, and don't trust people who are business minded, that type of thing. And it had those, and I did get my chuckles. But there has to be more than that. When we watch Lemonade Joe, and we've talked about Lemonade Joe many times on the pod, one of the great things is it's more than just a Western made under a country in the Soviet Union. There's genuine filmmaking, there's genuine comedy there, and that film in particular is interesting because we actually don't know fully what the political leanings of the film itself is, because it's making fun of both sides, and the people behind the scenes of Lemonade Joe were from both sides, people who were communists and people who loathed the communists, the Soviets. Here, you look at pretty much everyone and it's like, yeah, Soviet, Russian, or USSR. And I still liked it for it being its thing, rather than what I think most people of our age, especially, having this ironic look at a country that was, for all intents and purposes, ruled through an insidious system, making a piece of art that's probably propaganda. I think with a lot of internet commentators, you would look at it like that, like, oh, it's a film made through the USSR, and that means it's going to have the underlying evil thing in it.
Yeah, or it might even just be a thing of like, okay, this is a thing that's made for children that's going to have propaganda. You might go to the cynical expectation of like, oh yeah, it's just they've came up with the message and then they just cobbled something together that's like barely passable. But no, there's like actual artistic mastery at work here.
The worst expectation I had was that it was just going to be shitty, and it was going to have sprinklings of amusement in there from that angle, rather than genuine comedy. But this was genuinely hilarious. It made me laugh quite a lot. The biggest critique I have is it's just too damn long. And as I said, I was impacted from being familiar with the source material being just digested and regurgitated so much, but that's not this thing's fault. That's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, it's nearly 2 hours, and it could have been a nice 75 minutes, 80 minutes, and I would have been real happy. And there's plenty of moments where I'm like, you could have cut this, or this, but yeah, I had a good time overall. I'm glad that you brought it over, and
I'm glad I chose to actually follow through on it, yeah, because it was really worth seeing.
for yourself, you walked in with this. You wanted to know a bit more about the source behind the meme, but even with that, with the knowledge that this was a Soviet film, were you having those hopeful expectations of that thing I was just talking about, of the propaganda-y thing?
You know what? Despite the fact that it seems obvious that the answer would be yes, not really. Kind of just when I was watching it, it just was not on my mind, or even walking into it. It was just like, oh, well, what would a Soviet, animated thing, like Soviet era, that country thing be? So yeah, talking about it now, it's like, oh yeah, why didn't I have those expectations? I guess it's because I did read that, like, okay, this actually does seem to be a little bit acclaimed, and like people are actually liking it. Like when people were commenting on, like, one of the animations that's like copying the thing from the movie, people were actually referring to the characters by name. I'm like, oh, okay, so these people from the West are actually familiar with who the specific characters are. Like, obviously they're based on the book characters, but like the visual designs of them are familiar enough to them. So it's like, okay, there actually seems to be some sort of merit here. So I was walking in kind of expecting, like, okay, there is something here that people really like or gravitate towards. And that was, yeah, one of the big things I was interested in. It's like, what is it about this foreign thing that even Western people seem to enjoy? And yeah.
Do you have any idea, and I don't know if you do because the internet and meme history can be very hard to pin, but do you have any idea how this meme thing came to be, like where it originated from, and or at least how did a movie that was a TV special thing for the Soviet Union in the late 80s make this leap?
Yeah, so it seems to be that, obviously in the last year, 2022, like the West seemed to kind of discover it. It seems like since 2020, people that grew up with the film, or at least are from the countries where the film was made, it's like, Russians and Ukrainians, with the explosion of social media and meme culture, they were, it seems like, posting clips from this or reminiscing about it, and it seemed to have like sort of resurgence of relevancy in their communities, and it just seems like somehow it's spilled over to, the more international eyes.
That happens with, say, Bollywood, for instance. Every few years, there's that one Bollywood movie that sprinkles over. Recently, it was RRR, Triple R. That was a movie that's now Oscar nominated.
Oh, okay.
That's how big. But a few years ago, what was it like? What was that movie? I think you saw the second part of it, Bahubali.
Yeah, Bahubali.
That was one where it's like, but there's just stretches where they aren't, and
certainly with the whole globalization and like Netflix and all that, like
the
it's so much easier to get access to international content.
I was listening to recently a podcast discussing this issue, or not issue, but just this phenomenon happening of sites like IMDb, Letterboxd, and other places, and YouTube as well, where films from certain countries are now rising in the ranks of these lists. You know how it's like the greatest movies ever, and it'll always be like The Godfather and The Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
But now it's like some Brazilian movies in the top 5 that no one's ever heard of outside of Brazil. And it's because all of the Brazilians are using the internet to just boost it up, being like, this is good. And that's what happens with Bollywood, Indian movies, and happens with even Polish movies in recent times. And there's other things like that. And I think this is just a lingering example of that, where there's a movie from the past, from so long ago, that's also just a cutesy little animated thing, but people from who grew up with it in Europe are putting it online, discussing it. I read that one of the things I read was this got awarded some kind of trophy or prize from Czechoslovakia because it was very popular over there. And when I read them, like, I got to make sure this isn't from Czechoslovakia, because when I was watching it, there were certain words and lines that I'm like, oh, that sounds like from Lemonade Joe.
Czech, Polish, and Russian have a lot of overlap.
They do. And has it always been like that, or did that kind of get cemented more when Russia kind of had a little party with each one of those countries and decided to stay there too long?
I have no idea. I think
Let's ask your mum.
Maybe long time ago in the past, there was one great Pangea of Slavic countries.
Well, I'm just curious because, your mother, say, grew up in an era where Poland was under Soviet rule, and so
both sides of my family escaped communist Poland to come to Melbourne.
And have talked on the pod about how there were certain things that communist Poland had to enforce upon itself, and Polish people didn't like it, but it was there.
My mum, she was told, like, okay, make sure you pass all your subjects at school, but don't you dare do well in Russian language class or something like that.
But I think that's just a fascinating byproduct of film culture now that the internet exists, that some of these foreign things, whether they're new or old, have reached audiences that they may not have in the past due to people boosting them up in the algorithm. And there's obviously some negatives to that as well. Like, it can be quite annoying when these groups do that. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with K-pop culture on Twitter, but if you mention anything relating to K-pop,
you're telling me about that BTS thing.
Yeah, don't mention. They'll read the transcripts and they'll get us. But and people get annoyed at Indians doing that with all of their movies and making all of their movies, even if they're garbage, in the top 100s of things. But you know what? I'm fine with it, honestly. I'm sick of fucking seeing the same 4 movies as the top movies all the time. And it's making me want to check out things that, honestly, I wouldn't have done before. Like, I would not have watched this if you didn't know about it through just random meme culture. And this is one of those times where the random meme culture actually grabbed onto something that was good.
Yeah.
That was actually a fine piece of art.
It wasn't just a one weird line that sounded kind of funny.
It wasn't one weird little piece of animation in a movie that was rather poor or lackluster. And if anything,
it wasn't just a reaction face.
Why is it that one when there's so many other great ones in there of pieces of animation?
One of the big things that shocked me when I actually looked up the animation that became the meme was like, oh, it's so brief.
It's so brief. I love the Doctor's sword fight scene the most when it comes to those like snappy visuals, very creative. That one, how just one-handed and cuts the guy's clothes. He does the full Zorro thing // but I don't have too much else to say about this. It's very simple and straight to the point, but it is unique. It is different. People, if you have not watched it for yourselves, again, I say watch it. I recommend it highly.
Yeah.
You just know that it's a bit slower paced because it's too long, but you can break it up into the 2 parts and it works just fine, I think.
And unlike, the whole Irishman joke of like, oh, the way Scorsese intended, this one actually kind of is intended to be watched in 2 sittings.
And funnily enough, I enjoyed the second part more than the first part. So
I do have to watch it again at some point because just a lot of stuff was happening yesterday and I had to stop myself.
Another critique I have, and this may be a bit controversial because I can see people loving this. I didn't care for not the music per se, but this is one of those animated films where it never shuts the fuck up. Like, it's always got some fucking piece of noise in it, whether it's diegetic or non-diegetic, whether it's a piece of the score or not. It's just always fucking making loud noises at you. So be warned of that too, people, if that's something that crawls under your skin a bit. I have a tolerance for it, but it was wearing on me after a certain point. It's just so much stuff being thrown at me visually as well as noise.
Sleep.
Did you have that at all? Because I know that you can be affected by that as well.
To be honest, in this, I didn't really notice it. Not really, no. So if it's there, that's valid to bring up, but I didn't notice it personally.
Do you recommend this for those out there?
Yes, I do. This is a good one.
Thank you so much for bringing it over. I was trepidatious, but especially when you say I found it because of a random online meme, I'm like, that's not winning me over on this.
Believe me, if you said the same thing about something, even I would be trepidatious of it. Like me saying, like, oh, I discovered it because of a meme was a little bit embarrassing on my part as well.
I've told you this. Sometimes my wife Rachel will react negatively to films that you recommend, whether she's seen them or not, and sometimes that the listening people recommend from just a pitch like that. Like, why is this recommended? Oh, because Bartek saw it with his mum like 10 years ago. I was like, oh. Or that was 20th Century Women, just for those who wanted to know.
Yeah.
Like, Bartek saw this with his mum.
It's not just 20th Century Women, but yeah.
But yeah, or an
Una and all
online meme, or like this person on thing recommended it to spite us. And it's like,
yeah. The reasoning is more so that my history in this episode rather than what I said last episode, because you gotta hold it for the episode itself.
So it is my recommendation, and I'm hoping if things line up well, we're gonna have some guests on.
Yes,
some guests and
plural.
Yeah, 2 people. Won't give it away in case they don't come on, and then I won't be disappointed. But I want to talk about an Australian war film.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has Brian Brown in it. You remember Brian Brown? He was in Two Hands. He was the bad guy.
Yes, that's right.
He's one of the many actors in this, but it's mainly Jack Thompson and the British actor Edward Woodward in the film Breaker Morant, which is a...
I've heard the name before.
It's a historical film. It's a true story film. So it's a real-life thing. It's a well-known film for those who are into war movies and Australian films. It's probably up there, to put it in context for you, Bartek. It's like, when it comes to Australian war films, it's Gallipoli or Breaker Morant. It's that type of thing.
That's probably why I've heard of it, yeah.
For Australians out there who want to join us, this is on Netflix here. It's one of the few actual Australian movies on Australian Netflix.
Okay, good for me then.
There was a period of time where it's like, I think it was like when the pandemic started, Netflix updated its Australia section because it had nothing in there. So it's like, now you can watch Bad Boy Bubby on Netflix, which is hilarious.
Yes.
And Breaker Morant's on there too. But I've been wanting to get around to this. It's one of those where I have seen it before, but I want to watch it again. And I thought, well, we got to do it on the podcast. And I think let's bring on some guests to chew into this a little bit more. But everyone, please make sure to give this a watch for yourself. Breaker Morant is available out there in the world. It's not just Australian Netflix. I did have a quick gander. Somebody put it up on YouTube as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if the quality's as good as the Netflix. But you guys can find it. It's out there, so give it a watch in the interim of time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well as this film that we just watched. You can find us on your social medias under on Twitter and Facebook under Spit and Polish Presents. This is in the description below, as well as our email address, which is...
also in the email below, spitandpolished@gmail.com.
I like how you said also in the email below. Like they're writing an email
Ryan
to
in
us.
editing, replace me saying the word description. I'll say it now that you can put in. Description.
Mr. Black. No, I'm not going to do that, actually. In fact, when you say description, I'm going to put email below again, just to spite you.
You're going to put email?
Below. But a pleasure to be back here talking movies with you, Bartek.
Yeah.
It's great to sit down and just, it feels like we have a little film club, this podcast. It's like each week we come in and we discuss a little film that we watched on our own, in our own time, with our own ways of watching it. And when I watched it by myself. My wife was too busy catching up on schoolwork that she had to do. So I got to watch it on my own. And she walked in one time saying, "Oh, is the movie over?" Because it was a live action segment. And she thought they were like the wraparound.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, this is like one of the 15 live action segments. And then she went, "Oh, okay," and then walked off.
I watched it alone in my underwear.